So, Kathleen, are you around? If you are, if you can hear me, join me on the stage here. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me okay?
Perfect. Yeah. Sound great.
Right.
Look great. Let's see. Do you have slides?
I do. And I think I'm ready to share them. So let's make sure.
Let's see if it works. Let's make sure.
How's that?
Boom. It's working. All righty. Thank you so much. The stage is yours.
Okay. See you on the other side. Hi, everyone. Quick note before I dive into the media company topic, my journey, I'm Kathleen Booth. I'm SVP of marketing at Tradeswell. And my journey is a little bit relevant to what I want to talk about with media because I started out as an agency owner. And for 11 years, I founded, I built, and then later exited a marketing agency. So I worked with a lot of different companies in different industries, really on demand generation. And then in 2017, I sold that company and I went in-house at another agency called Impact, where I was focused on building a media business around the agency. So that was my first experience with this concept of a media strategy. I left there in 2019. Since then, I've been in-house at a series of B2B tech companies, and now starting in January 2022 as head of marketing at Tradeswell, where we are building a media strategy. So I'll touch on that in my talk. First and foremost, how did I originally stumble into this world of media? I've always been a B2B marketer. Media wasn't originally on my radar, but there was a book called Killing Marketing by Joe Polizzi and Robert Rose. And it was a follow-up to an earlier book called Content Inc. And these books were really the inspiration for Impact, where I was in 2017, to build this media business around what was the agency at the time. And the thesis of those books is really that you can monetize marketing, which I just thought was so interesting. You know, marketing is always seen as a cost center, and now in the world we're living in and the economic times we're living in, it's so evident why that's a risky thing. If marketing is seen as a cost center, it often gets cut first whenever there's uncertainty. But if marketing can become a profit center, all of a sudden you have a different conversation. And so that was what really led me into this world of media. And at Impact, I worked really closely with the CEO there, and we built an editorial team. When I first came in, they had a marketing department, and we added an editorial director. We already had folks on the team who could write, but we amped up the volume of content, and we were publishing 20 plus articles a week. And this was, when I first joined, we were a 35-person company. So how did we do that? We relied on lots of our full-time staff to participate in writing and creating educational content. We had some freelancers who helped, but we were scrappy and we were able to get a lot of content out. We also diversified our content strategy because a content marketing strategy is different than a media strategy. And so we went from really focusing on a blog to having a blog with a lot of content, but also adding in more thought leadership, what we called news reaction articles, which were very much like kind of a breaking news coverage. Here's what happened, here's why it matters, and here's what you need to do about it. Podcasts, multiple podcasts, video and live shows. We also launched a newsletter, and we did this when I first joined in the fall of 2017. And I was passionate about not launching just another corporate newsletter that was a thinly veiled content distribution vehicle. And so it went out 3 times a week, which is not normal for a company newsletter. And it really started with an author point of view. So to draw the audience in, to form a relationship. And it included a lot of curated content, including as well some of our content. But it wasn't about just pushing our offers and getting people into the funnel. We also grew a community. We eventually grew it to be, by the time I left, 5,000 plus members on Facebook. And that was a community for marketers. We began holding events. The last year I was there, which was the year before COVID hit, we had a 700 plus person conference. That was going to be an annual conference. Obviously, that got disrupted a little bit by the events of the world. And finally, most interestingly, we did monetize our marketing. We were bringing in sponsorship dollars for everything from sponsored articles on our website to sponsored webinars, event sponsorships, sponsorships in the newsletter, et cetera. So we really began to attract the interest of other organizations that were marketing into our same audience, which was marketers who wanted to reach them through the vehicles we had developed. The aha moment for me came when I started to look at the results we produced. And so this is real data. We launched this media strategy in 2017. And until then, you can see the company had been growing nicely and steadily. But from 2017 to 2018, the number of website visitors per year really dramatically increased as a result of all of our audience building strategies. And with that, you can see that revenue grew as well. And I think that to me was what really hit home, was that this wasn't just about attracting an audience. By virtue of attracting an audience, we were building something larger that was resulting in greater revenue for the company. So at the same time that was happening, we started our media strategy in 2017. Around the same time, you had Stripe acquire Indie Hackers. You had, shortly after that, Outreach acquire Sales Hacker. And then, the list goes on. Robinhood and MarketSnacks. HubSpot acquired The Hustle, Zapier and MakerPad, and most recently SEMrush and Backlinko. And I love this quote by Dharmesh, who's one of the founders of HubSpot. Modern media companies have a software company embedded inside. Media has gotten very technologically driven. Next-gen software companies will have a media company embedded inside. And that's really kind of the gist of what I'm here to talk about today. So why is a media strategy more relevant now than ever? This trend began to really kind of gain steam in 2017, 2018. But I think now it is more important than ever, given what's happening in the world and what's happening in the world of marketing. So, when I look around, and I just joined Tradeswell in January of 2022, so this is very fresh for me. When I came in, we were a Series A company. My job was really to figure out the strategy, to look deeply at our customer and think about how we were going to get in front of them. And what I saw when I looked around me was this intense battle for customers. And, when I first got into the marketing game, and even as recently as when I sold my agency, content and SEO were where it was at. And that was a very effective and inexpensive way of capturing demand. But now content and SEO are really oversaturated. I mean, people figured it out, right? Everyone's creating content. Everyone's got a blog. The content's gotten better. So there's a lot out there, which is great for buyers, but maybe not so great for businesses that were so heavily reliant on content and SEO to drive their funnels. And then also at the same time, when you were using a content and SEO demand capture strategy, really that strategy is premised on you're competing against other providers within your ecosystem for buyers' attention. Like, how can we be the one that gets found when they go online and look, whether that's looking for a solution or looking for an answer to a question? Whereas now, today, what's really happening with the proliferation of all kinds of media is we're competing against all forms of content. There's no shortage of content out there. There is a shortage of attention on the part of our buyers. They only have a limited amount of time, of mental bandwidth, et cetera. And it's not just competing against another company that has a great article about how to use a certain kind of software or how to solve for a productivity problem. It's about competing with Stranger Things, with a great podcast, things that people are consuming in other ways that may not have anything to do with your competitive landscape. At the same time, the pandemic really accelerated a trend that was beginning anyway, and community has grown explosively. And I like to say communities are the new Google now. And I think about my own experience as a head of marketing who buys a lot of software. 5 to 7 years ago, I was going on search engines and Googling and asking questions like, what's the best project management software? And that was how I self-educated. And I would read blogs and I would go to the websites of the companies that were in that space to try to figure out what they did. I don't do that anymore, and nor do most of my peers. What I do now is I go into the Slack groups that I'm a part of that are full of other heads of marketing, and I say, hey, what is the project management software that you use and really love? And I'll get a couple of answers, and generally 2 or 3 providers seem to come out at the top and get mentioned the most. And then what I do is I do go to Google, but now instead of doing an unbranded search, I'm doing a branded search, and I'm typing in the names of those 2 or 3 providers and going directly to their website. So I'm actually bypassing the entire organic buying journey that SEO and content was designed to solve for. So all of these are kind of table setting trends that are the backdrop to why the media strategy can be so impactful for companies that want to win in this new environment. So what does it mean for how we do our marketing? There are a couple of things that I've observed. One is that the buying journey is really beginning in these walled gardens. I mentioned Slack groups. It doesn't have to be Slack. It could be a Discord group. It could be your LinkedIn network. There are plenty of places that we all find to meet with and connect with our peers. Wherever that is for your buyer, it is where a lot of these buying journeys are now starting, and then they're moving into branded search, as I described earlier. And so because of that, to get at bats, you need to win the hearts and minds of not just your buyers, but their peer set, because previously to get at bats, you needed to show up at the top of Google, either organically or via your ad, or you need to show up in feed where somebody's consuming content with an ad. Now, if I'm going into a Slack group and saying, what's the project management software I should use? I'm going to get recommendations, and those people are either going to be the current or previous customers of a platform, or they're going to be somebody that has heard great things about a provider and is so convinced that that solution is fantastic that they're willing to recommend it, even though they haven't used it. So not all of the people making recommendations are customers, previous customers, or even in-market buyers. And if you think about that, what it really means is that you have to completely change the way you do marketing. Full funnel marketing is aimed at in-market buyers or people that are going to purchase from you. But if the buying cycle begins with a recommendation from someone who isn't in market and who isn't going to buy from you, that changes the entire game. And it means you really have to build a strong brand that inspires trust. But it also really means you have to stay top of mind with these other audiences that haven't and may never buy from you. So how do you stay top of mind from somebody who isn't your customer? That's really the question. And so when I think about traditional full funnel marketing, it's really, as I said, about capturing demand, again, which means in-market buyers. Because of that, it puts offers at the center of the strategy. We need a hook to draw these people in. We want to get their email. It's what we've been conditioned to do as marketers. And whenever that is the focus of the strategy, it puts us squarely in competition with other providers who are all trying to do the same thing. They're all trying to reach the same set of buyers. They all have their own offers. And so it's a game of who can create the best offers and follow through and messaging and branding. Now, when you look at media strategies, instead of being about capturing demand, they're about capturing attention. So buyers don't have to be in market. And it goes back to what I said earlier about there isn't a shortage of content, right? There's tons of content and offers. There isn't a lot of attention. And so if we form our strategy around capturing attention, that's really how we change the competitive game. And it gets us also in front of buyers that don't have to be in market, that peer set of your buyer who may be the one making the recommendation in that Slack group. Unlike full funnel marketing strategies, which put offers at the center of the strategy, media strategies put the audience at the center of the strategy. They're really geared towards building audience and acquiring audience. And so you're not, in this case, competing with other software providers or whoever you compete against. You're really competing against other content. So what is a media strategy? I've talked a lot about it. I've used the term. What does it really mean? And I could get very tactical, but the tactics aren't as important as the sort of principles that underlie it. And what makes for a great media strategy are really 4 things. The first is habit-forming content. And this is so important because if you think about traditional full funnel marketing, again, it's about offers. And with an offer, very often you see like a fantastic initial bump with that offer. And then interest will trail off over time, either because the content in your offer becomes stale or because you've moved on to other things. Like very few offers have a really long shelf life. And so we put a lot of resources into developing them, and then it's like a sugar high. We get that first bump and it trails off. But what we really need is to stay top of mind with our audience. And so building a habit amongst your audience and getting them to continually come back to consume your content requires a different approach, and it can't be offer centric. So it relies on things like episodic content. Winter games is a great example of this. Lots of different, every month there's a different winter games and people come back for it. Shows, episodic shows. Breaking news is another way. If I know that you're that your website is constantly a source of really great information that keeps me on top of what's happening in my industry, and you provide good context around that for me to understand how I need to apply that knowledge in my job, I'm going to keep coming back. Newsletters are another great way to develop a habit in your audience, because you're pushing the information out and meeting them where they're consuming a lot of their information in their inbox, and then drawing them back to your website. And newsletters tend to set an expectation. It's coming every week. It's coming every day. So habit forming content is really at the heart of it. And then a point of view. And this may be a little controversial because there are many different ways of thinking about media. I'm not talking about building the BBC or CNN or Fox News, where theoretically, we have a very journalistic approach and we can't have opinions. We're just reporting the news. Yes, are there principles of journalism we want to apply here? Absolutely. But the best media companies have some point of view that attracts people and gives them a sense of a bigger purpose behind that content engine. And so Leah talked about kind of that mission-driven business, and you can be mission-driven, or you can have simply a point of view. And a great example of this within the media world, actually, of how this is done is the Washington Post. So the Washington Post is a very legitimate journalistic outlet. But if you'll notice, if you look at their newspaper, they have under their masthead the statement, "Democracy dies in darkness." And I used to live in Washington, D.C. back in my 20s, and I was a subscriber of the Post. And this was before they rolled out that tagline. And I unsubscribed as soon as I wasn't like reading the newspaper more than 3 days a week, because it wasn't worth it to me. I wasn't getting value. But when they rolled out that tagline, I thought, yes, this is something I can get behind. This is a point of view that contextualizes why we're doing what we're doing. And now I subscribe to the Washington Post, and I got to be honest, there are many times when I don't read it even once a week, but I'm not canceling my subscription because I've connected with that point of view. And I feel like they have a clear vision and position. A sense of belonging. This is also key because it's what prevents churn. And churn can take many forms. It can be the classic churn we think of in terms of customers who stop paying, but it can also be churn in our audience. And by giving our audience a sense of belonging, a feeling that they're a part of a greater whole, we can really keep them coming back. And that's why you see so many, both traditional media businesses as well as what I would call new media businesses, creating communities and also holding events as part of their approach to their media strategy, because it's a way to bring that audience that they've developed together in person and have that relationship not just between the audience and the brand, but also between individual members of the audience. When you can accomplish that, that is something that's incredibly powerful and will have people continuing to come back to your brand. And lastly, monetization. And this is interesting because we don't often think of, again, marketing as a profit center, but if you are successful in rolling out a media strategy, it opens the door to begin to monetize marketing. And I talked a little bit about how we did that at Impact. I'm going to share some more examples before I finish of other companies that are doing that in different ways, but you can absolutely build new revenue streams with a media strategy. So what's in it for you? I've talked a lot about this. There's changing the nature of your relationship with your buyers. The relationship you have with an audience member, somebody who's really there to consume your content or be in your community or attend your events, is totally different than with somebody who's paying you to use your software. And often it's a more powerful connection. And as a result of that, it opens up the possibility that literally everyone could be in your flywheel. And And it also opens up the potential for you to identify new product opportunities. When you have this bigger audience, some of whom are not necessarily the best buyer for the product you have now, one of the things you can do is look for ways to say yes to those people in another manner. And so when I was at Impact, we were looking at things like creating online courses or paid community options. So there are other possibilities there beyond simply advertising and sponsorship. And what this all really does is it gives you a chance to arbitrage your customer acquisition cost. So we all know CAC in the business world. We all look at it, hopefully, and it's a key metric that we're always trying to reduce while increasing lifetime value. Well, with a media strategy, if you're able to grow a massive audience, often the cost of acquiring an audience is far lower than the cost of acquiring a customer. And so if you can acquire a large audience and then build ways to monetize that audience and also to eventually get them into your flywheel and into your sort of your buying cycle, you can dramatically bring down CAC. And I'll share an example of a company that's done that really well in a minute. But it rewrites the competitive rules. You're no longer competing against the other players in your space in the same way. It's a very blue ocean strategy. And that can help you build a moat that is incredibly valuable, especially at times like these of economic uncertainty, et cetera, because your audience isn't going to go away when the economy gets bad. Whereas customers, in a traditional sense, might go away depending upon what your product is and what space you play in. So lots of different possibilities here. And the last one I just want to mention is higher valuations. Again, I'll share an example of this, but because of the immense audience that you can build with a media strategy and the potential to monetize it, investors are starting to look at this when they evaluate companies. So now Tradeswell, how am I using this in my current role? Again, I'm 6 months in. So our vision is to be the Bloomberg for e-commerce. And we are an agnostic player in the e-commerce ecosystem. We have data and research and a SaaS platform that is really an operating system for what we call real-time commerce, which is really just this sort of world of programmatic commerce where everything is moving so quickly. We have launched a media brand. We launched it on March 27th, and it's called The Current. You can see it at thecurrent.media. And really the idea here is that if we want to be the Bloomberg of e-commerce, we not only need to provide our customers with a platform for operating their business in this new world, we also need to provide them with current industry data and trends, as well as the news that is most important to them. And so we launched this website. It's pretty incredible. It's run by a team of one. We have the most amazing person who's our lead editor / writer. And it has e-commerce news, original and curated content, expert lists. There's a lot on there. You can certainly go down and look at it. But the idea is to make it the homepage for e-commerce professionals on the internet. And eventually, maybe we'll integrate it into our actual SaaS UI. And somebody can see their news right alongside their company data. So it's like a Bloomberg terminal. We launched that March 27th. April 6th, we launched the Daily Current, which is our newsletter. And this is published 5 times a week. And it has the top 5 stories of the day, along with editorial context. And we feature a tweet. And so I always say it's like, think of it like CNN's 5 things, but for e-commerce. We're trying to save people time. And next week, we're launching a community called Anywhere E-commerce, which will live on Discord. And this is going to be the community for omni-channel e-commerce professionals. So we're really kind of taking those steps down the path of that vision I outlined earlier. And I'm sure at some point we'll begin to layer in events as well. But I have a small marketing team, so I'm only going to bite off as much as I can chew at once. Early results. We've been doing this for 3 months. But when I look at the data, I see that The Current, which is our media site, is growing at 700% month over month in terms of visitor traffic. That's 9 times it is currently at 9 times the traffic of Tradeswell's site. We as a company have been around for 3 years, and already 3 months in, our e-commerce news site is far outpacing the traffic on our software site. And that's because there aren't that many people who are in market for software, but there are a ton of people who are in market to want to be able to learn and do better as e-commerce professionals. Our newsletter, the subscriber list is growing at 15 times the rate of our company's opt-in mailing list for, corporate content. So really promising directional data here, and I'm excited to see where it's going to go. The thing I want to leave you with, because I started out talking about really big companies like HubSpot and Stripe, et cetera, is that this is not a strategy that's just for the big guys. When I started at Impact, we were a marketing team of 5 and a company of 35 people. And so we were scrappy and we wrote a lot of the content ourselves. We had a couple freelancers who helped us here and there. And then we asked our team members to write. And at Tradeswell, we started it this year. We're a 45-person company, and we have one full-time person who's the product owner. And we really are treating the current as a product. So our product owner creates the content and runs the site. And then we have a marketing team of 4 that helps to promote it. The other examples I wanted to mention, because I think these are really interesting. One is Profitwell, which if you're not familiar with it, it's an incredible software platform, and as well as a consulting business. This company started its media strategy in 2018. At the time, based on publicly available information, my estimate is they had a marketing team of about 8 people, but it was very much driven by the founder. He was an evangelist for this. And just 4 years later, they've been acquired by Paddle last month for $200 million. And a lot of this is because of the momentum they gained because of their media strategy. Another really interesting company is FreightWaves. This company was founded in 2016 and started its media strategy in 2017 before it really had customers for its primary software product. So they were frustrated they couldn't get PR. They launched the media plan. They started with 1 journalist. Today, they have 40 journalists. And the media business, they're a $30 million company as of 2021. Their media business generates 50% of their revenue. So $15 million a year from advertising, events, et cetera. And their investors have valued them at $300 million. So this isn't just a feel-good marketing strategy. This is like real business that results in real money and higher valuations and pipeline. So that's what I want to leave you with. And I am happy to take questions.
Thank you so much. My first question would be, how do you see what's the difference between a media strategy and content marketing?
Yeah, I think content marketing is aimed at buyers and prospective buyers. And a media strategy is really, and content marketing is about monetizing a product that you're looking to sell. So that's the objective. A media strategy is aimed at a broader audience that may or may not be buyers. It should probably include people who are your buyers and prospective buyers, but it may be broader. And as opposed to being aimed at monetizing a product, it's aimed at monetizing an audience. And a secondary effect of that is that also you get opportunities to monetize a product.
So could it be that still the line's a little bit blurry? So for instance, in Profitwell's case, it is content marketing. Every show, every podcast is about the product they have.
Yeah. The reality is there's a continuum, right? And on one end of the continuum, it's very product focused content marketing. And on the very other end, it's like a true kind of like journalistically driven media strategy. And so there's a lot of shades in between there. And I would say you're absolutely right. Profitwell falls like a little bit like maybe closer to the middle. Whereas a company like FreightWaves is closer to the more journalist kind of approach. And so, depending upon where you fall in that continuum, it will depend upon your goals, your organizational commitment. FreightWaves threw itself all in and decided to build a true media business. Profitwell used a media strategy to build a software business.
So about your media business, the current.
Yeah.
So how much can you share about cost to get it going? What's the staff working there? Like, our traffic is growing. So how many writers, can you share more?
Yeah. So believe it or not, we have 1 writer. And now you're going to ask me how we did this, because if you look at our website, it seems ridiculous that would be the case. And the way we've done this is a little different. So a traditional media site is built to host all of its own content and to have everything be original. And we actually decided in e-commerce that it was oversaturated with media. There's a ton of places for e-commerce people to go to get their news. And so we built this a little differently. And the platform that we chose to build on, it's a proprietary CMS that we purchased, allows us to create original content. And so about 20% of it is, but then to curate. And with the curation, the content doesn't live on our site. We actually point people to the original site where the article appeared. And what we really believe we're solving for is that e-commerce person who is going right now to 20 different websites to find their news. We want to solve for being able to put all that news in one place, whether we wrote it or not. And so we don't want to just be another place they have to go. We want to bring it all in one place. And what's great about that is it makes us a fantastic partner with other media platforms that otherwise might be considered our competitors, because we're actually sending traffic to them.
So if most of the content lives on other sites, then how do you get traffic? So like, is it SEO traffic you're getting, or?
It comes in several different ways. So about 20% of the content is original. And the person that we hired to be the product owner was the former editor of Technically Baltimore, which is a tech startup publication. So he's comes out with a journalism background, is a true editor writer. So he's covering news, covering conferences and events, writing different stories. So that's attracting a good amount of traffic. But, we're also strategic about how we create content. And so some of it is pure thought leadership, but some of it is like, hey, once a week we do an article on key career moves within the e-commerce world. And so we might profile 5 people who've either left or taken new, CMO roles in e-commerce brands. And yes, when we go and promote that article on social, we're tagging those people. We're also interviewing people from the e-commerce world and profiling them on the site. And so there's that baked in virality that I think helps a lot. But the other element to this is the newsletter, pushing the news out through the newsletter and bringing people back to the site. That's part of building that habit I talked about.
Zach here is asking, how did you decide on Discord as your community?
So this is a debate we have a lot internally. I first discovered Discord because I have a 15-year-old boy who likes to play lots of video games. And at first I thought it was just a gaming platform. But when I became aware of it as a business channel was really when I joined the first e-commerce SaaS that I was a part of, and I learned that Shopify was holding its developer conferences on Discord. So that kind of opened my eyes to that world. Since then, I've seen a lot of businesses building there. There are some kind of audience-related reasons. You have to understand your audience and where they're going to go. Not every audience is suited to Discord. But what I liked about it is that unlike Slack, if you build your community on Slack, when you reach a certain point, unless you're paying to host each member on that community, you can't see a full history, unlike Discord. So there's like a financial reason. If you're going to grow a really large community, I'm trying to think like years into the future and build it on a platform from the very first day that will support that growth and not get unduly expensive.
Nicola is commenting that, would you also, let's say your content, the media property, whatever you have is successful, would you also sell ads on it, like monetize the traffic?
Yeah, absolutely. We're not doing that right now yet with the current. I could see us doing it someday. And Nicola's absolutely right. You have to, if you're going to do that, if you want to do that, and quite honestly, if you want to be successful with a media strategy, you have to take it seriously, and it can't be a thinly veiled marketing vehicle. That's why we hired somebody who came out of a publication, who was a true editor of an independent publication. And we made him the product owner, and we don't interfere with the content that he writes. That's his editorial discretion. And if he thinks that we're creating marketing content that's good enough to appear in his publication, he'll include it, but it doesn't always happen. We don't get to put everything in there. So there's a little bit of a push and pull there. And I expect that at some point we will be in a position to be able to monetize.
All right, last question. So building a media company or media company is not a binary. Do you have one or not, right? You can do a lot, you can do a little. So Colby here is asking, any tips on how to choose the right medium, podcast, video, blogs, etc., and any advice on starting this process as a tiny marketing team?
Yeah, so I am a pro at tiny marketing team world. I go into a lot of Series A startups as head of marketing. And so while I might have like a fancy title, very often I'm like in there rolling my sleeves up. I've hosted multiple
Mhm.
podcasts. I think the answer is you have to really play to your strengths, because if you try to do this in a way that is uncomfortable, you're just not going to do it. Right. And I happen
Mhm.
to love podcasting. So if you follow my career, you would probably see that I've started a podcast at every company I've worked at. And that's because it comes really naturally to me and I feel like I can do it quickly. And as a result, I'll
Mhm.
stick with it. Whereas, if you are a strong writer, you could do that. If you like being on video, you could do that. Start with the thing that you enjoy doing the most and try to scale that and then go from there. If you're seeing early successes, you might have ways of doubling down or augmenting your team to be able to do other things.
Yeah, and repurposing, right? So if you do podcasting, record it in video too. That goes on
Yeah.
YouTube, and then clips go on LinkedIn and Twitter and
You can create show
transcribe.
notes. Exactly. This is why I love podcasts. It sort of is like a 3-in-1 content strategy.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.